Hello, everyone. I'm your host, and welcome to Poke Analytics. Here, I cover singles and double battles, VGC tournaments, and going over Pokemon news and leaks. So pop in your earbuds, just relax, and listen to some Pokemon. Hello, everyone. Today's episode, me and my special guest, Jake.
Hello.
So we're going to be talking about the new DLC news. In case many of you do not know, part 2 of Scarlet and Violet's DLC is coming out on December 16th. So, as we're recording that, it's just a month away, and let me just say, I am so insanely excited for the DLC because it looks amazing. It looks so much fun.
Of course, yeah, the return of the king. We've
Very,
got
yeah.
Incineroar coming back. So couldn't
We're
be more
gonna
excited.
So before we start the episode, I will say that this is going to be talking about leaks. So if you are not interested in listening to leaks, that's totally fine. I'll see you guys next week. Um, but if you are here, thank you for coming and thank you for listening. We're not going to be talking about leaks for any new Pokemon that haven't been officially revealed. We're only going to be talking today about returning Pokemon that have not been revealed and new Pokemon and new moves that have been revealed. The only leaks that we're going to be talking today is returning Pokemon that are not currently in Scarlet and Violet. So yeah, if you aren't interested in listening to leaks, I totally understand that. But as we start off this episode, we have a list of practically every returning Pokemon in Part 2 DLC. And what Jake just said is true. The King of VGC is back. What do you say about Incineroar that hasn't already been said?
Oh, it's hard to think of anything. You either love Incineroar or you hate Incineroar.
Yeah, I
The second Litten was revealed in that trailer there, it was a complete mix down the line of the audience of either thunderous applause or screams of agony. And it's that's I think perfectly sums up the Incineroar situation. Either you're happy to have him or you're dreading the return.
yeah, I even asked for Christmas to get me one of those Wolfie VGC sweaters where it just says ban Incineroar.
I'm more on the appreciatory side there. I'm historically a balance player. I love a good fake out parting shot. Uh, so you
That
you won't catch me complaining.
that's the real question for Incineroar because in Gen 7 it had like a 80% usage in 2019 and then they gave it a buff in parting shot. So then in Gen 8 in 2020 in regulation like the series 12 it was still 80% usage. So I'm wondering if they're going to give it a nerf this generation because they seem to give a lot of nerfs to Pokemon in Gen 8 to from Gen 9. Like Zacian was nerfed immensely. Regieleki was nerfed. Rillaboom was mostly nerfed. And these were VGC staples in Series 12. So I'm wondering if they're going to do anything to nerf Incineroars since it was literally the number one used Pokemon, or if they're either going to buff it again. I would not be surprised if they again gave it a buff, or if they're just not going to touch it.
Part of me feels like Incineroar gets the Charizard treatment, where they don't care if Charizard is better. If they're gonna release new forms of Pokemon, give Charizard two of them. So I think that the Incineroar is a Pokemon that the Pokemon Company really likes to see in the popular play. I think that it's a fan favorite Pokemon, so I think
Mm-hmm.
that they're going to continue to allow it to dominate because who doesn't love a big wrestler cat? So I think Incineroar is coming back at full force. I do think that there's some elements of the current metagame that might start to give it a bit of a run for its money. But I think that overall Incineroar is coming back with a vengeance, and maybe there's something to be said about Hisui and Arcanine having a place in the metagame that might discourage Incineroar usage. But I would I would be shocked if it premiered with less than 60% usage in just while people get the new toy syndrome out of trying to make it work.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. Whenever a new Pokemon like comes out, that's when it was like hit the peak. Because like when Ogerpon, like the first tournament Ogerpon was allowed, it was practically everywhere because people were just trying to figure out how to use Ogerpon, and then like in the Toronto regionals on day two, it wasn't on the usage chart. So I totally see your point of new toy syndrome, but it's the fact that Incineroar, the only thing that people need to figure out with Incineroar is how do you deal with it Terra, and because like with a new Pokemon like Ogerpon, which is new toy syndrome, nobody knows how to fight against it, nobody knows how to use it. But with Incineroar, you've had 2 generations of knowing how to use it and how to deal with it. But now the question remains on how good is it in terrastalizing? Because it could, for example, terastallize into a water type. No, it could terastallize into like something that could deal with like a water and rock. So
I
it could
think that
terrestrialize.
I
It could
think that
terrestrialize.
Incineroar's terastallization defensively will fluctuate with the metagame. We've seen with Iron
Totally.
Hands, when Iron Hands took over initially, a lot of the time it was Terra Grass, and then it drifted Terra Water, and it at the point in the metagame, it's drifted through a few iconic Terra types that are typical to expect from an Iron Hands. And I think that Incineroar as this sort of bulky parting shot Pokemon or maneuvering fake out Pokemon serves a similar role on teams to the point where I think it'll be indicative of changes in the meta as to what Terra type Incineroar is using. Personally, I'm interested in Fairy and I'm interested in Dragon. I think that both of them are very strong typings defensively in the current metagame, and I could see Incineroar benefiting from either of them tremendously.
Oh yeah, totally. Like Terra Water would be really good. Terra Grass might be okay. Yeah, Terra. I could see Terra Grass being used. Terra Fairy, like you said, could be practically amazing on Incineroar, and especially since Incineroar isn't meant to be like a sweeper. It's meant to be supporting. It's kind of. I think it's going to be like a Moongus, where maybe you don't want to terrestrialize it every battle, but it's very good when you do want to terrestrialize it, since terastallizing just takes away all the weaknesses. Could take away all the weaknesses of your Pokemon. And we don't even know if it can. We don't even know if it gets parting shot back. So maybe that could change some people's opinions on the Pokemon and the terastallization. It just really all
Even with
depends on what.
U-turn though, even with U-turn, it definitely had
Oh
a
yeah.
major impact on the on the format though. So I think that just the elements of intimidate plus fake out is just so strong, and it's because of that that I feel like it's definitely not worth sleeping on the upcoming Hitmontop either.
Oh yeah.
That
Totally.
there is definitely an element of you put fake out on an intimidate mon and it becomes usable. So, um, but Incineroar has all the right stats in all the right places, and I think that even if they take away parting shot, which I don't think they will, I think that it's going to be a serious threat, particularly when you combine it with Iron Hands and Rillaboom, or combine it with Urshifu. I think that there's going to be some scary teams that rise up initially there, and I think that all this will do is make our boy Farigiraf a bit more useful.
Oh yeah.
Stop
100%.
those fake outs.
And especially since Incineroar has the fire dark type, which is pretty good defensively, like it's a pretty good counter to Fluttermane, even though he can't really like fake out Fluttermane. But he could, even though he can't fake out Fluttermane, being able to like parting shot Fluttermane, or just being able to resist its Shadow Ball and take its Moonblast pretty good, depending on how you EV it. Yeah, Iron Hands might pick up in some usage due to the fighting type and the Drain Punch. And I could see Farigiraf going up in usage, but especially if Incineroar isn't really carrying any dark type moves, but some Incineroar like to carry knockoff if it does get that in Gen 9, or Darkest Lariat, which could give Farigiraf some trouble.
Of course, yeah, yeah, and that's definitely the thing too. That gives Incineroar so much strength in the Terrestrial metagame. There is that if I've of course prepping for Toronto. There, I played against a lot of Farigiraf teams as that giraffe comp was rising up there, especially with the I think it was the Rinya team that was going around there. And if you can get your opponent to waste their terrestrialization on a Farigiraf, you're sitting pretty. So there's definitely a huge benefit to
Oh, 100%.
um, to put that sort of pressure on a Pokemon that has so little impact on the game.
Yeah, I used Farigiraf in Regulation D, and it was really good. Like, it was a really good Pokemon for my team, but it was really annoying if I was up against a Pokemon where I was practically forced to terrestrialize for Farigiraf into like a fairy type. So I could definitely see Farigiraf being picked up in usage, but having a Pokemon that needs to terrestrialize is kind of a liability and could be exploited very, very heavily.
Of course, definitely. So
Now I'm just I it all just depends on if they give Incineroar any new moves or if they take away new moves. Because if they get rid of Parting Shot, yes, Incineroar will stick back to U-turn to pivoting, but Parting Shot was an amazing move on Incineroar being able, because Incineroar could just take the hit Parting Shot, and now you bring in your healthy Pokemon in the back against a Pokemon that has their stats lowered. So U-turn will probably still be the choice of move, but I could totally see some people not really wanting to use Incineroar as much. But it's the fact that no other intimidators in the game has fake out other than Hitmontop, and Hitmontop is coming back. It's just the fact that it had intimidate, it had fake out, it had parting shot or U-turn. And it also has a it has a pretty good defensive typing that usually matches well with the metagame. So
and
I
again, that 90 base defense and special defense and 95 HP is nothing to scoff at. Like this Pokemon has bulk. It's the perfect speed for running parting shot on the team there. It's not too
mhm.
slow that you want to use it in Trick Room, but it's not so fast that it isn't going to underspeed with that parting shot and give you a safe switch in. The 115 attack is just so solid that you could reasonably, and people have used it offensively in the past. There is an option there where people could be running Terra Fire and dropping that dark weakness or the weaknesses from the dark type to fully resist Flutter Mane and hitting with some serious power behind it. I won't rule that out as a possibility, but the way the metagame is shaping up there, I think Incineroar is going to make a huge splash.
Yeah, totally. I totally see just Incineroar when it comes back. I totally just see it just like banging onto the competitive scene, and everyone's first thought is either, okay, how do I use Incineroar on my team, or how do I counter Incineroar? Because it's one of the main Pokemons that you need to like prep against. It's the one that you need to do calculations against. It's the one where you need a game plan on how to deal with it, especially if it's so popular. And I totally see it getting 50% usage day one, totally, easily, not even close. So I think Incineroar from the list might be the number one most excited Pokemon to see. Um, if we are going over the most feared Pokemon coming back in this DLC, we have to talk about Smeargle. Again,
Of course.
Like Incineroar, where do you even start with Smeargle?
I think the best place for me, I think, to start about Smeargle is to look at what's changed since Smeargle was last with us. So, Smeargle, of course, sat out of Pokemon Sword and Shield, as many celebrated. But during Sword and Shield, there were some extremely powerful moves that got added to Smeargle's moveset. We haven't seen Smeargle in a metagame with Decorate yet. We haven't seen Smeargle in a metagame with Revival Blessing yet. In the past two games, things have changed very much. We haven't seen Lunar Blessing yet. So the move set for Smeargle has expanded to such an insane level that regardless of how little bulk this thing has, there's some serious motivation to throw it onto teams there. It really seems like there's a lot of powerful options.
Yeah, totally. And just in case, someone, and just in case for the people who don't know, Smeargle has a gimmick where it can practically learn every single move in the game. Except a few exceptions like Dark Void. In Generation 7 it lost the move Dark Void, but I can't really think of any other moves that it doesn't get access to. But that's its whole gimmick. It has a terrible, terrible base stats. Like its best stat is its speed, and it only clocks in at 75. So its stats are practically the worst stats for fully evolved Pokemon outside of Shedinja. But alongside Shedinja, it has a really good gimmick where just being able to learn any move in the game means it's so versatile. Like practically back in Generation 6, it wasn't are you running Smeargle? It was what set are you running Smeargle? Because there
Of
were
course.
so many different moves and so many different sets that you could run with Smeargle. It was practically endless. You couldn't really go wrong with Smeargle.
Well, that's the thing too, and we need to look at the options that it has available. For instance, Smeargle with a beneficial nature for its speed stat at level 50 can hit up to 139 speed. If you toss a choice scarf on that, suddenly you're hitting 208 speed. You're outspeeding Chen Pao, you're outspeeding, of course, Fluttermane, and you're dropping spores on them before they get a chance to move. This thing is the fastest spore user that we have access to, I believe, and it is just extremely dangerous. Like, I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot of people thinking back to the 2016 era and saying that this thing lost Dark Void. It's way less powerful than it used to be. You can't just throw it up next to a Xerneas, hit Void and Geomancy, and see which one your opponent manages to stop. Um, the the new options on the table for Smeargle are really increasing. It's no longer going to be just the Super Fang, Spiky Shield, Spore, and Dark Void, but now it does have options. Population Bomb, like there's this thing can throw out Stab Population Bomb, and you go, well, it's only got base 20 attack, but that really starts to add up when you start to get 10 hits on it. So
Mhm.
it's got ruination, and suddenly it's got access to a super fang that uh alternative move. Like it's got super fang adjacent move, I guess. So the options for Smeargle have really grown, and I think that it's worth I think a lot of skilled players are going to be loading this thing into their builder very early in the meta, and we're going to see a
Mhm.
lot of variety. And I think even worse so, we're getting this thing in the beginning of the new year, which means for every global challenge in the 2024 season, Smeargle is going to be on the table. So there will be people who are winning points to get themselves the worlds who are playing closed team sheet Smeargle.
Yeah, that
That's a terrifying thought.
it's I think like like people were when there was closed team sheets on like Showdown and online, people really hated in DD Armor Rouge because it was practically, is it running Flash Flyer or is it running Wide Guard, Trick Room, is it running Weak Armor? And because it was so dangerous in closed team sheets, I think it got beat. There's no way Armor Rouge is scarier than Smeargle on a closed team sheet, and especially since it has so many different moves. Because back in like Generation 6 or Generation 7, most people would run the same moves, but because in Generation 9 it has so many different good moves, it's practically impossible to try to like you have to guess. You have to guess on what moves it runs, and if you guess wrong, you lose the battle. So open team sheets might hurt Smeargle, um definitely, but but it has so many new moves that it's still going to get a lot of
Of
usage.
course.
Like it could
And
learn.
in the dark times of 2016, I when I paired up against a Smeargle, it was very often running Dark Void, Spiky Shield, maybe Follow Me, Fake Out. Like you had a good idea as what it was using, and there was elements of surprise, of course, because there was no open team sheet meta back then, but there was a predictability of these are the best moves Smeargle can use. And I think that at least while we're starting out this new meta, I don't think anyone can confidently say what is the best Smeargle set because I can't imagine not running Revival Blessing on this thing. But it's going to have some serious four move syndrome where there's too many good options to pick.
Yeah, totally. And I just remembered it could also Terra Ghost, so now it could also win against fake up battles if you really need to. But it's just like every status move you want, it learns. Like you can tackle a spore, you can tackle a revival blessing, you could tackle a silk trap or a spiky shield. You could do follow me, you could do fake out, you could do toxic thread, you could do shed tail. I'm just so
Lunar
many.
Blessing. Lunar
Lunar
Blessing
blessing,
is
that's another
huge.
one.
Yeah,
Um,
that is a broken move. It brought Cresselia back into the fold there. It was a staple on every Cresselia set, and it will 100% be used on this thing.
and it can also use ruination, so now it can hit ghost types instead of super feign. Just so many. There's so many different moves where you have to learn how to go against every single excuse me, you have to go against every single one of them. Yes, open team sheets might be its biggest weakness. It might be like one of those um might be one of those nerfs that wasn't indirectly like a technical nerf, but it's just the fact that it has so many different moves. It's definitely easily the scariest Pokemon coming back. Forget that an Incineroar had 80% usage in Generation 7 and Generation 8. Yes, Incineroar coming back is scary, but Smeargle coming back is a whole different level of like it um no pun intended, it's literally intimidating how Smeargle is going to be coming back.
I'm just taking a look at some calcs here because there is the one element we haven't talked about here is its abilities here because there's a few options there that it does have. Of course, it's got its three abilities there, and what I'm looking at right now, just in my calcs right now, is the combination of technician and population bomb. So it can. If you take a look at a max attack Terra normal population bomb, that is doing serious damage. Like that it's not mouse hold damage, but it is a way more diverse Pokemon than mouse
Even
hold.
yeah,
So
even if you don't terastallize into a normal type, it's still going to be doing good damage.
yeah, that's something that often with Smeargle, people were running things like you mentioned Super Fang and Ruination as an alternative. And the problem with those moves is that Smeargle could eventually have the "all my friends are dead" problem. And the benefits of Population Bomb is that can be securing KOs for you. There's there's not a lot of options you can throw on a Pokemon with 20 base attack that can secure KOs, but the population bomb equipped with technician will be dishing out serious damage,
Oh yeah, totally.
probably two hit KOing some things
And and even if its stats aren't really something like its stats are terrible, there's no getting around that. Its stats are terrible,
oh
but
yeah.
you just give it a focus sash. Just give it a focus sash, and its bulk problems are that figures out the bulk problems because Pokemon with focus sash like Chien Pao is amazing Pokemon, and even with focus sash, it's such a threatening Pokemon. With Smeargle, that's the same thing. You run a focus sash on it, and it's now even harder to get rid of.
and that's something that we haven't really dived into either, is the new items combined with Terra. Like, we saw what happened with Tornadus in this format, where Tornadus suddenly, it can Terra Ghost, it can hold a covert cloak, and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly there is no stopping a Tornadus from getting its Tailwind up. If a Tornadus player wants Tailwind up, they get Tailwind up. Like, there is ways to secure that it gets what it wants, and those people will be employing that sort of methodology into Smeargle. So personally, I think that come global challenge time, I might be throwing some cheeky choice scarf spore mechanics together, but there is a lot of options for how to make this thing more lethal.
And especially since the DLC is coming on December 16th, that means that players have 15 days to figure out what they want to do with Smeargle, and that's more than plenty enough time to run with Smeargle. And especially since no big tournaments are practically going to happen for a while after the regulation
Yeah, I believe it's
is
Portland, that Portland is right at the beginning of January there.
right at the
So I think
beginning.
yeah, I think it's the first weekend of January is Portland. So
I
that's
mean,
going to be
but
a
I mean, players will still have like 15 days, which I'm sure is a good enough amount of time to figure out
of
what they
course.
want to do with Smeargle.
I think Portland is going to be very chaotic because of that. Yeah, it's January 5th is Portland Regionals. So I think that they're going to have just over 2 weeks, pushing 3 weeks, to learn new mechanics and how the meta's changed and how these things are going to be involved. And I would not be surprised to see Smeargle entering day 2 at Portland.
Mm-hmm. Now, so those I think those two Pokemon are easily the scariest Pokemon coming back to VGC. But looking at the list, now we go from utterly terrifying to these will make a good amount of splash in the VGC. So the first one I see on the list is Venusaur. But the problem is that Venusaur without its Mega or Gigantamax form, I mean it's practically outclassed by Lilligant. If because like Venusaur's main thing is that it's chlorophyll and it has sleep powder, but I think Hisui and Lilligant or normal Lilligant is better than Venusaur because it not because it's faster, but because it has to move after you, which means if you so that means like Torkoal can use eruption first if you really want to, and I don't think Venusaur gets after you.
Yeah, Venusaur certainly has its niche. I think that there's you can do some serious damage with it. Like the base 100 special attack is decent. Its base 80 speed does allow it to outspeed some very pivotal Pokemon in the sun, but of course only in the sun. It does have some very good defensive bulk as well as resisting Flutter Mane. So there is some elements that you can switch it in on a moon blast, which is always good. But I do think with the loss of its G Max move, it will go back to something similar to what we saw pre Sword and Shield. It's a Pokemon that you need to be worried about. It can move fast and sleep powder you, um, but and it is a tool. It is a tool in the toolkit of the Sun player, but I don't see it dominating the metagame like it did in Sword and Shield.
Totally. I don't think it will definitely be like Incineroar or Smeargle, where it's like practically almost on every team or have a really high usage rate. I think it will have its place. I think it will have its niche. Um, I think it would be like if it had a usage usage stat. I think because it's coming back, I think people want to use it because like they miss Venusaur or Venusaur is like their favorite one of their favorite Pokemon. So I think that's what I think it will get used for that reason at Portland. But if I were to guess, I think it'll have like a 10% usage only because it's new, it's exciting, it's coming back. It has its niche,
Of
but I
course,
don't
and there
think it's
is
going to make a splash.
there is an element too that the Sun teams will now have the fire, water, grass element, which is something that Sun
Hmm.
teams. It's always been. I've run Sun in the past, and every time you kind of want to have that fire, water, grass balance, but you don't want to have your Urshifu Rapid Strike doing no damage because of the Sun. And the benefits of having not to get ahead of ourselves here, but having Walking Wake in the format will certainly make Venusaur's place shine more.
Yeah, and I think and it looks like the new Paradox Pokemons like Iron Leaves and Walking Wake are going to be in the Pokédex, so I think they are going to be legal, but they are totally a whole different discussion for like another
Of
episode or
course.
even at the end of the episode
Yeah.
because like Walking Wake is a pretty good Pokemon and I think it's going to make a good usage in VGC, but that's like that can be on a whole different topic
Of
because of
course,
just
and we're
what to
still
talk about.
waiting on the stats for the other members of those two trios as well. So a
Yeah.
discussion
So
for a later day, but
next in the Generation 2 fearful on Generation 2 list, we have two Pokemon, Kingdra and Porygon 2. If Porygon 2, other than Smeargle, I think Porygon 2 might be the second best Gen 2 VGC Pokemon that isn't a legendary. Cuz especially
Por-
since it can hold
Porygon 2
Eviolite.
was one. Yeah, Porygon 2 is one that I'm very interested in. I was
And especially since it can terrestrialize now, like it could
coming
Terra
into such an
Ghost.
offensive meta. Now it's seeing how Dusclops performed as one of those Eviolite Trick Room Pokemon, knowing that Porygon, it's got the stats that it needs to have some serious defensive power, and it's got an incredible toolkit. It always has. I think that this might be another piece that really elevates the power of those hard Trick Room teams.
And especially since it could terrestrialize now, so like it could terrestrialize Dark to stop a Prankster, or it could terrestrialize Ghost to stop the fighting type moves and to stop Fake Out. And it just has a wide variety of moves, and especially since it has Trace, like it could come in and trace like an Intimidate and start intimidating the Pokemon, or it could like trace into like a Water Absorb. No, it just Trace is such a versatile ability. I think it's definitely going to have some usage in coming into intimidators and intimidating them while also being able to trick room.
And of
I
course, there's always the download option as well there, where
totally.
Porygon 2, it's 105 special attack, which is once you get that download boost, that is nothing to scoff at for attack power. And the access to attack options like Bolt Beam, it can suddenly be hitting a lot of Pokemon neutrally and dishing out a lot of damage. So I think that there's something to be said about will this Pokemon serve more of an aid to a Trick Room team than something like Dusclops, which is only really there to Pain Split and Nightshade, as opposed to if you call the leads right and get the download boost that you need, suddenly Porygon is dishing out some hard damage.
hmm I totally see it being used on trick room teams. But here's a question: how do you think Kingdra will do?
That is an interesting question. Of course, it has seen some usage historically here, so I don't think it's out of the question for it to perform well here. It does, of course, as a Swift Swim user, we are seeing a lot of Rain has been consistently good in Scarlet and Violet. You could argue it's been the strongest archetype in almost every format we've played in Scarlet and Violet,
Hmm.
and it does have some good stats, but I'm not sure unless it will really depend on the move pool, in my opinion, because that 95 for attack and special attack is leaving a lot to be asked for. I think that Water Dragon, of course, is a really interesting typing. I think that it's got really it's pretty much the only thing in the meta game that's hitting it hard is Fluttermane.
Hmm.
But again, that might be the single most difficult Pokemon to work around is Fluttermane. So um, I don't know. I think that if they give it the right toolkit, it may see some use. But otherwise, I think it might fall victim to the same power creep there that has caused Barraskewda to have virtually no appearance there, or Ludicolo, or other Pokemon that you'd think would be able to make use of that swift swim ability.
Yeah, because one move it really needs this generation to at least stay with the metagame is it needs Wave Crash. Like it definitely needs Wave Crash because like its strongest physical water type move is liquidize, it's either waterfall or liquidization. And then its strongest special attacking water type move is Hydro Pump, which of course is 80% accurate, so you're almost gambling whenever you hit Hydro Pump. So if it gets Wave Crash, I think it could definitely stay with the metagame. Um, Especially in the rain and you terrestrialize it into a water type, getting rid of the fairy weakness, and you just do huge damage with Wave Crash. And especially since you could do Wave Crash and then Draco Meteor to run a mix set if you need to. But if it doesn't get Wave Crash, I think it will just fall into the obscure Swift Swim users that a bunch of other ones, like you said, Ludicolo and Barraskewda will just fall back down to no usage rate.
Of course, and that's the thing too is there's this ever pervasive problem when it comes to having a water type attacker on your rain teams these days of why not Urshifu? I'm a huge Palafin advocate. I've been a huge fan of it since the very beginning of Scarlet and Violet, but every time I've loaded it into the builder, I just have to ask the question of why is this not Rapid Strike? And I think that there's for Kingdra to make a splash, it's going to really need a solid move pool that answers why to run it on instead of Urshifu Rapid Strike, because you really don't want to be running two offensive water type Pokemon that both lose to Fluttermane, because I do not think for a chance the Fluttermane is going to dwindle in usage in this new meta.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, like you said, yeah, it really all depends on what new moves it gets this generation, or it's just gonna fall back to the Swift Sim obscurity and just get outclassed by Palafin and even Urshifu. It's really, really hard to be a physical water type and be on par or outclass. Like even just be on par with Urshifu is incredibly, incredibly difficult.
Of course, yeah, and I think that that's going to be looking at the list of Pokemon that are coming back here. I think a lot of them are going to have that same question added, be it if they're fighting types or water types or dark types. It's how do you justify putting this Pokemon on a team where the sort of power creep has invalidated a lot of its niches? And I think that that's a similar problem that we're going to run into with Hitmontop, with why not Incineroar. And I think that that's kind of a bit of the shame to having added these super strong Pokemon in Regulation D, that now that we're getting an expanded dex, you have to really consider the options that we have right now, and why possibly these Regulation D Pokemon might be better than anything coming in Regulation F. And we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing that now in Regulation E. We're seeing that people started to play a lot with Blood Moon, and they started to play a lot with Ogerpon, and even things like Okie Dogie were making a splash. But as the metagame developed, suddenly it's back to Roaring Moon. It's back to Hisui and Arcanine. Urshifu with Rain is still the strongest team that we're dealing with. And I think that that's a really, really scary sign for how a lot of these Pokemon that I really enjoy for their chances to make a big splash in this new uh, regulation.
Mm-hmm. Because yeah, especially since Power Grade goes more and more. When you look at the list, I saw Metagross, and Metagross has usually been like a good VGC mon, but just with so much power creep. Like with if Metagross came back, my first thought was like, oh boy, a good steel type that isn't King Gambit. I'm gonna love using Metagross on my team that is a steel type and is not King Gambit. But then I just realized, oh wait, it loses to Ogerpon, it loses to Fluttermane, um, it loses to Incineroar, it loses to
I haven't
Chi-Yu.
run the I haven't run the bullet punch calcs yet to see whether or not it can just get around that here. We do know that let me just go ahead and pull up its base stats here.
I
So
mean,
it's
its most popular
135
set.
attack is pretty strong.
Yeah, and its most
So
popular set is a weakness policy, especially with a steel psychic type and its really good bulk. A weakness policy could be a good choice, and I think a weakness policy metagrows could be justified for the meta, but then again, it's the fact that it's so slow that you either need to run Trick Room or you need to run Bullet Punch. I think it could be a good Trick Room user, especially with weakness policy, which would make Metagross absolutely terrifying. But I don't think it's going to make a splash in a scene like it originally did.
I think that there's certainly a lot to explore here because the fact of the matter is it's 80 HP isn't the best, but it's got 130 defense and 90 special defense. So it has the defensive stats to be seriously good. And the question then becomes what do you do to make the most usage out of that attack, and what Terra type do you run on it?
Oh
Because a
yeah,
good
Terra.
defensive Terra type is something very interesting that could make this mon very powerful.
Yeah,
If
that's
you could
like
defensively Terra and take things out with bullet punches, then combined with clear body, suddenly you're not losing to the Incineroars. You're not losing to the Fluttermanes if you can get the right Terra type on it.
I 100% totally forgot about Terra for Metagross. But yeah, I feel Metagross is going to be a great Terrasilize mon, thinking about it. Like it could Terrasilize into a fire type or a water type or a
And
yeah, or just something to
I
get rid
think
of the
that
psychic type.
there's almost a trend. I think that all of these pseudo legendary class Pokemon, be it Dragonite, Baxcalibur, Hydreigon, even, they've almost all of them were designed in a way where they've got great stats in a typing that holds them back. And I think all of them have seen a lot more usage than you might expect in the Scarlet and Violet era, but all of them are Terra Hogs. And I think that Metagross could be great, but I do think it is going to be the type of mon where you're really inclined to press that Terra button. So it becomes something where if there's Wicked Blow, there's Shadow Ball from Fluttermane, there's Flare Blitz from Incineroar, and any dark move from Incineroar. So there it gets to the point where you're really looking at what Terra option do I put on this, and what Pokemon can you pair with it that aren't going to regret that you used your Terra on your
Mm-hmm.
Metagross every time.
Because like Metagross, especially with the clear body, could be really good in an intimidate fested metagame, especially with Incineroar coming back. But with terrestrialization, I feel like it's going to be a great mon with terrestrialization. But if it's a Pokemon that you don't really want to terrestrialize, it's definitely one of those Pokemon where if you don't terrestrialize it, you have to work around it. You have to make up a game plan for it. Whereas for some Pokemon, if you don't terrestrialize it, it's just the same old Pokemon. But with Metagross, you don't terrestrialize it. Well, now you got to figure out a new game plan.
There's also something to be said too. There has been a lot of this um, take the Terra type to match your priority stab move and deal a bunch of damage. That's been a go-to strategy for
Mm-hmm.
Pokemon throughout the Scarlet and Violet era. And I think that there's a lot to be said about how do people tend to counteract these priority moves. And one of the big ways is Psychic Terrain, but you don't really want to be setting up Psychic Terrain to take a bunch of stab Zen headbutts. So there is an element where one of the best ways to block these priority seal attacks empowers Metagross. So there's certainly a lot to be explored with this, and I think it will really shake down to how many of the new Pokemon have adjusted the meta, and is there a place in it for this sort of defensive priority attacker?
Yeah, because I could totally see like a choice band choice band Terra Steel Metagross going around, because then it could get rid of its ghost and dark weakness, which really hinders it, and it doing massive amounts of damage with bullet punch, and especially if we pair it with Sword of Ruin. So I definitely think Metagross will have its usage. I think it will have its place in VGC, but I don't think it will skyrocket. But I also don't think that it will just drop to not being used. I think it will still have some sort of usage. And if I'm being completely honest with myself, I think it could win a regional, but you have to have the right team with it and you have to put it in the right hands. But I definitely do think it could win a regional.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think it's there is something to be said, and people said this about a lot of the sort of pseudo legendary class Pokemon coming into Scarlet and Violet. People looked at Baxcalibur and they said, sure, it's got the stats, but look at that awful typing. And again, Baxcalibur is just one of those Pokemon where it's carried by Terra. And you look at Dragonite. Dragonite is a Pokemon that, sure, it's had plenty of success in VGC beforehand, but it has become a staple Pokemon. Like if you do not have your Dragonite matchup planned going into an event, you are throwing, because Dragonite is so good. And again, it's elevated so much by Terra being able to remove that 4 times weakness, being able to remove that fairy weakness. Like there's something to be said about finding the right Terra for these Pokemon that are historically held back by having a lot of weaknesses. And again, Metagross of those pseudo legendaries probably has the best innate typing. So if you just drop the Psychic and go for Terra Steel in a sort of Goldango approach, suddenly any steel move coming off that base 135 attack is going to be devastating. So I think that there's a
Yeah.
place on Trick Room and there's a place on Priority that this thing could do some serious damage.
Yeah. And that's really the big question when it comes to all of these Pokemon, because like you may look at a Pokemon like Rhyperior. Like Rhyperior has had some success in like early VGC where there wasn't like it was only Dex, like in 2014 or maybe in 2017, and especially in early years like Gen 5 where it could get some usage. But then you remember, wait, it can terrestrialize, and now that holds a new different element, because now you take Pokemon who might not be used, like Rhyperior might not have a big splash on VGC, especially with power creep. But then you remember, wait, it could terrestrialize and it could get rid of its many weaknesses. So how good is it going to be now? But then you got to also remember, if it has to rely on terrestrialize to be a useful mon, then it's not really that good of a mon.
That's the big thing too. And you look at Rhyperior and say that 130 defense stat is really strong, but when Urshifu Rapid Strike is going to be there's nothing in this list, spoiler alert, there is nothing in this list that I believe is going to invalidate Urshifu Rapid Strike to the point where it's not something you're going to play several times per tournament. I think that you will always need an Urshifu Rapid Strike plan, and if your trick room physical attacker just loses to a single rapid strike, that unless you Terra, then you are setting yourself up for failure. And I think that there's maybe they give it some sort of move options that helps it a lot. But I'm not holding out hope for my boy Rhyperior, despite how much fun
Yeah.
I had with it in the Dynamax era.
Because I'm going to test Rhyperior because I love Rhyperior. It's one of my favorite Generation 4 mods. So I'm definitely going to be testing with it, and especially with that Lightning Rod ability, directing all like wild charges from Iron Hands or Thunderbolt. And I think it is a good mon to terrestrialize, because like if you could go against an Urshifu, then you could terrestrialize into a water type and not care about searching strikes anymore. But It's
Of
but
course, but
but
then again, when you
when
have
you
to
have the
when you
force,
have to Terra to get around that drain punch from Iron Hands or that Ivy Cudgel or that like Horn Leech, like if that 4 times grass weakness, it doesn't matter that your defenses are that high when you've got a Horn Leech coming off of any Ogrepin is gonna start. It's gonna consider that food, and I think
totally,
that that's a really scary situation for any mon to be in. That it's got a 4 times weakness to a type that Rillaboom has, Ogrepin has. There's one thing Regulation E really did for the game was solidify grass type as a solid offensive type, and I don't think that a mon that's 4 times weak to grass is going to get by when it's got so little else going for it. I think that it could
totally.
surprise me, but at this point, I'm not expecting Rhyperior to make a splash at any majors this year.
Yeah, I'm not expecting Rhyperior to do well at all. I think it's one of those Pokemon where I love it, so I'm going to use it. I'm going to test it, and I'm going to try it on my team. But I don't think it's going to get very much usage. I think it may be on like that one obscure team that you'll see at a regional, like when in the Toronto regional we saw that Thunderous Therian, not no Thunderous Therian, yeah,
Yeah,
Thunderous Therian
that was
form.
Boyd that used it. Yeah,
So
I
you may
lost to
see
that
it.
in Swiss. It was really bad.
So yeah, you may see Rhyperior on an odd team, or it could do well at a regional, but you have to know with Rhyperior, like you have to know what to do with Rhyperior if you want to make a good usage, like what Jamie did with Thunderous or with base Ogrepon, not just like with base Ogrepon. So I think it could be good on specific teams, but you have to be so specific with it, and even then, I don't think it's going to get high usage rate. So now if we look at the Gen 5 Pokemon, there's two that stand out, and let's talk about the Generation 5 Mon that stands out the most. You guessed it, Whimsicott is coming back. I'm so excited. Um, I made a team already. I made a team already with Whimsicott, and I love the idea of Whimsicott coming back, and I don't have to rely on Tornadus or even Murkrow if you want a prankster Tailwind. Um, because when it comes to prankster tailwinds, you either have two options: you have Tornadus or you have Whimsicott, and both do different things. The main reason I'm using Whimsicott over Tornadus is because it has the grass typing, and because it has prankster fake tiers, which Tornadus does not have.
Yeah, there's also the element again here. There's catches to each side because there is the speed element to
Mm-hmm.
Tornadus there, where in its incarnate form there, it is going to be slower than Whimsicott. So Whimsicott can get off those prankster taunts and stop it in its tracks. Unfortunately, of course, it doesn't like to take a bleak wind storm, but the toolkit that Whimsicott has is extremely impressive. There's the element where suddenly the ape has a better support than Mousehold. Whimsicott is substantially faster. Whimsicott has some priority support moves and can beat up as well. So there's Pokemon that already exist that are going to be enabled to be much better just by having Whimsicott as an option there. There's some powerful abilities there that perhaps Worry Seed could be an option there. And of course, there's always that fun cheeky memento option. So I think Whimsicott's going to be huge. I think it's a world champion Pokemon for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was devastating in Pokemon Sword and Shield, and I think that the elements that kept it good are still there. So I think that, and then there's also the element of if you're running an attack, a spread attack on Tornadus, you're running Bleakwood Storm, and there's Dazzling Gleam is just 100 times better. That like you don't have to sit there worrying about whether or not it's going to hit. And Moonblast is just such a solid move that I think that I think we're going to see a lot of Whimsicott, particularly early on with that new toy syndrome. But I think that as the meta develops, we're just going to see more of it. I think that it's got all the right options.
Probably.
I'm not sure.
And it's the
Yeah,
fact
exactly. Like,
and it's the fact
oh,
that
continue.
there's a reason, like it's the fact that when it comes to Murkrow or Tornadus, I mean, yes, Murkrow has the dark typing, but other than that, there's really no competitive reason to use Murkrow over Tornadus. I mean, from a competitive standpoint, you may like Murkrow more than Tornadus. Like, yes, that is a valid opinion, but if you're looking at a competitive side, there's practically no reason to use Murkrow over Tornadus. But when it comes to Whimsicott versus Tornadus, there is a reason why you want to use Whimsicott over Tornadus and vice versa. There is a reason why you want to use one over the other, and that's what I really like about both of them. Is yes, they both have Prankster Tailwind, but they also have other Prankster moves that set them out, that set them apart
Of course,
from
yeah.
the usage
Helping
from the
Hand, fake
metagame.
tears, like Charm even. There's a lot of options that are really, really, really strong. And I think that it will be interesting to see which moves that they keep from previous generations and which moves they choose to add in. Like we
Hmm.
can't forget that Tornadus was given every weather when it came back this season. Like they gave it huge buffs. So the question will be, does Whimsicott get the same sort of treatment? Is Whimsicott going to be carrying even more tools, the same amount of tools, or less? And I think that that will really, really determine its place in the meta. But the fact of the matter is that Prankster Taunt is going to be huge, especially because it outspeeds all of the other Prankster Tailwind users.
I think I don't think did Whimsicott get taunt in Generation 8 or Generation 7? Because I think if Whimsicott got
Yeah,
taunt in Gen it did.
yeah, and in Sword and Shield, I
Oh,
had Taunt.
oh, that's fun. Um, if Whimsicott
Yeah,
keeps taunt, if Whimsicott keeps taunt, then it's still gonna be good. It's gonna be really good in VGC. Like I totally see this on a lot of hyper offensive teams, especially with fake tiers. Like I totally see this being paired with Fluttermane and it like
Chi.
tailwinding, then it's Sunny Day, and then it fake tiers. It's going to be a pretty good partner to Fluttermane. Um, I totally see
And of
just being a
course,
good partner
Chi
with
again. I
everything.
think that there's I bet I haven't run the calcs, but I would guarantee that even Dazzling Gleam coming off of that 77 special attack is going to start to do a lot when Chiyu is on the field.
And especially since
like,
Whimsicott is a grass type, so yeah, it has like a 77 special attack, but coming with a Chiyu's ability, and it could do Energy Ball to scare away the rock and water types. I mean, it's not going to do huge damage, but I feel like an Energy Ball from Whimsicott in Beads of Ruin is going to do good damage to like Urshifu. So I don't think Urshifu might want to take a Heat Wave or a Dark Pulse from Chiyu when Whimsicott's on the field with Dazzling Gleam or Energy Ball. So yeah, like you said, Whimsicott is going to be a great partner for Chiyu as well. I think it's going to make a good splash in usage stats.
and there's
Um,
there's also, again, as I discussed with the other support Pokemon, that there is this element that suddenly Covert Cloak is an option.
oh yeah.
Suddenly Terra Ghost is an option. Like there suddenly Terra Dark to kill the prankster fight is an option. So like there's going to be a lot of tinkering for the Whimsicott user to fine tune it to their specific team. And I think that there's suddenly you can lead it in front of that Incineroar and not care that it might fake you out. You could not run Protect on it if you wanted to and settle for a fourth different move, because you don't need to worry about getting faked out if you're wearing that Covert Cloak. So I think that there's an element to Whimsicott that it got stronger just because of those new items and those Terra options.
Yeah, Covert Cloak. I keep forgetting about the new items. Like Covert Cloak is such a huge ability, and especially since it's going to be on Whimsicott of all Pokemon. It's like Covert Cloak. It was almost made for Whimsicott. Fake Out was was a big hindrance to Whimsicott, But yeah, Clover Cloak is going to be great on Whimsicott, and like Tornadus, I totally see it getting a lot of usage. But do you
Of
think
course, yeah.
Exadrill is going to be good in this season?
I have serious doubts for Excadrill. I was a big
Mm-hmm.
fan of it during that early Sword and Shield meta there, where it was that hyper offense Excadrill team. But now that it's not doesn't have that beautiful Steel Spike Quake combo there, I don't see it having a big impact there. And I don't think it's got the
Yeah.
stats to make an impact. As much as I'd love it to.
Really, the only meta Pokemon that I can think it beating is Fluttermane, but that's only in Sandstorm. Like it loses like even though Stompy Tantrum or Earthquake, if you run that, is going to do big damage to Iron Hands. Iron Hands just drain punches and gets away all the damage it just took. And it loses to Landris, it loses to Ogre Pun.
And And with
Um
60 and 65 for its defense stats there isn't a defensive Terra that's going to save that thing in this meta. You could Terra into a grass type, and I guarantee you that it's still not going to want to take an Urshifu Rapid Strike.
mm,
It's
I
it's
mean,
not going to be taking Surgeon Strikes there.
if
It
I'm
does not have the stats for
if
it.
I'm thinking of a Terra type right now that would be good for Exadrill, the only one I can really think of is Earthquake. I'm not Earthquake, what am I saying? Terra Ground Earthquake. That's what I meant to say. Just Terra Ground for to power up your ground type moves. Like the only really niche I can think of right now is you pair it with Tornadoes, you set up Sandstorm, and then that's when Extra can do Terror Ground Earthquake. Like that could be good, but that's really the only thing I can think of when it comes to Extra Drill. It was a really, really good Pokemon in Generation 5 and it had some usage in Generation 6. But it's the fact that really if you want Sandstorm, you kind of had to you have to prankster it. Tornadus is really the only good partner I can think of when I think of Exadrill. And it just loses to a lot of relevant mons in the deals and
And
the
again,
metagame.
T-Tar has had its impact on the meta there, but again, I think that there's this element of if you have Tyranitar and Excadrill on your team, you're stuck running your Terra on one of those two Pokemon, and that's
Mm,
forecasting your strategy to your opponent so early into the game. That I think that it's in an open team sheet meta, that's going to be very very inhibiting.
yeah.
Um, if you don't
And
have further thoughts on Excadrill, there is one that we passed over here that I think is a notable mention,
go
um,
for it.
and that is Porygon Z. Now,
Hmm.
Porygon Z has been um, it's had mixed performance there. It had some very decent moments there in Pokemon Sword and Shield. It's got decent special attack. It matches Fluttermane with that 135, base 90 speed, so not too slow. But most importantly, it's got that analytic. So if you stack up analytic with Terra Normal, Hyper Beam, I just ran this calc here. It's very interesting. So a max let me just see here. Let's switch that to modest here. So a max special attack, modest hyper beam from a life orb analytic Terra Normal Porygon Z is a 100% guaranteed one hit KO against 252 HP, 252 special defense Incineroar. Like
It one shots
that
Incineroar?
Yeah, it one shots max special bulk Incineroar.
What if
Like
okay, do the
I
calculations, do it instead of Hyper Beam, do it with a Tri Attack.
Okay, let me just see here.
Because it has a really
It's
high
still,
special attack.
even if you give it a special defense boosting nature for Incineroar, it's still a does 95 to 113%. It's a
Oh my
75%
goodness.
chance of one hit
But
KO.
that's a Hyper
You
Beam?
said try attack?
Yeah, because it has a really, really high because its attack stat is only 80 and but its special attack is 135. I mean, Porygon Z has its other than its special attack, its stats are pretty bad. Its 90 speed
Yeah.
means it's too slow for Tailwind and it's too fast for Trick Room. The only reason I glanced over it is because terrestrialization normal, like terrestrialized normal could be good, but that's only on specific teams. I glanced over it because it was kind of like the same thing of Exadrill, where it maybe will only have one good partner and will only have one play style. So I
The
don't think it will
question
make a
is though, is
splash.
that analytic yeah, so that's yeah, so I think analytic is interesting. I think adaptability, let me just see here. If we
Yeah,
switch its ability
adaptability,
to
like
adapt.
Porygon Z, like Porygon Z has a really good move pool. All three of its abilities are justified being used. Like adaptability is insane. Download, it's insane. Analytic, it's
Yeah,
insane.
adaptability boosted hyper beam is 100% guaranteed one hit KO against against boosted special defense max bulk Incineroar. So there's
That's
there's
insane.
something to be said. And try attack is still a guaranteed two hit KO, 57 to 69%. So there's some serious damage this thing can do, and there is the question of pairing adaptability with Terra. Um, that there is an option there of if you have a defensive Terra for it in a move that matches it, suddenly your Terra Blast is adaptability boosted. So I think there's some
True.
elements there where it could be very cool on the right team. I don't think that it's going to be a mon that makes a huge splash, but if this thing sets up a nasty plot and has the right Terra that
Ooh.
you're not expecting, it's going to be doing some serious damage. So it's worth considering. I don't think that it's necessarily going to break the meta or anything, but I do think that it's something that we need to look out for. And
Yeah,
I would not be surprised to see it making some niche performances.
I totally see it. I totally see it having a niche. I totally see it because it can do huge damage. It having a niche where it won't be like one of those metagame staples where you have to fear. But I think it's one of those Pokemon where it's not going to have a around amount of usage. But if you run into it and you don't know how to play against it, it's just going to destroy you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that's the case there, and I think that there the combination there of its adaptability with Terra is going to be very interesting because we don't see that a lot there. I believe the only other adaptability user that's getting a lot of usage there isn't one of those Hisui fish. Yeah, Basque Legion is the only one that's really making use of adaptability right now. So
Mm-hmm.
having something with that 135 flutter special attack there is suddenly very intriguing.
Totally. So now looking
It's
at
pretty much like getting a free booster energy and still getting another item on top
mhm.
of it. So
Looking at the rest of the list, there's only four other Pokemon where they won't do massive amounts of damage to VGC and they won't get high usage, but they'll have some sort of niche. And that is Primarina, um, Araquanid, and then the one cake Pokemon from Generation 8, I forget the name of.
Alcremie.
Oh, Creamy.
Okay. Uh, so
Let's start
Primarina,
with
we'll
Primarina.
just work in order there. Primarina has a very interesting case there. It can take I haven't run the calcs here, but I feel like that thing has the bulk to be taking a lot of really common attacks in this current
Yeah,
meta
like
here. So let me just
it can totally take on Urshifu, and that's something important to keep mind of where it could take a Surging Strikes and it could take a close combat and still deal with Urshifu. Um,
It has 116 special defense. It can take a Flutter Mane Moonblast and shrug that off. Like it has liquid voice, so it does have access to some interesting options for like hyper voice sort of throat spray stuff, which we've seen throughout Scarlet and Violet has been really good on things like of course Ursaluna Blood Moon and Sylveon as well have both had tremendous success. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that there's something to be said. And again, like you could always leave something like Hyper Beam in your back pocket there. So I think with the right moves, if it gets Scald back in particular, there's some serious use case for a Pokemon like Primarina. And again, everyone online has been begging for Tapu Fini. I've seen it all over the place. Bring Tapu Fini back. Bring Tapu Fini back, and maybe Primarina will be their Tapu Fini at home. So I think that there's an element there that the Primarina does have a possible place in the meta. Again, you have to think it needs to be on a team where you have your answer to Rillaboom and you have your answer to
Iron
Ogerpon.
Hands.
Um, yeah, Iron Hands in particular. I don't like 74 defense, 80 HP. It's not going to be liking those wild charges. So there is an element to that. And again, maybe there's a defensive Terra that it can deal with, or maybe an offensive Terra. Maybe you just turn it into just a fairy type, and suddenly
Yeah.
it can take that wild charge. It can take that wood hammer.
Or you
But
could
I think,
defensively terrestrialize it into a grass type. Now it resists grass, it resists an electric, now two of the biggest weaknesses. You're still weak to that poison type if you terrestrialize into a grass type, but I think you're more worried about the electric and grass type moves running around than you are more worried about the sludge bombs running around.
of course, yeah, I think that's very fair. I think that um, there's certainly the old okie dokies running around and stuff here, and maybe those will make a bit more of a splash once Incineroar is a thing. That maybe that guard dog is going to become a bit more useful. But I do think that with exception of Glamora and Okidogi, you're not getting a lot of poison attackers, at least in this current metagame. So
I
and
mean, you
I'm
are
not
forgetting
seeing
about
a
one
lot.
poison type.
Oh.
Iron Moth.
Oh yeah, I forgot that thing exists. It's not like I've
Yeah,
played it at
everyone
every local.
does.
Yeah, and that is a thing that's worth considering there. Is how will other mons that maybe have faded out a bit be benefited by these additions to the meta? But I do think that there's certainly a use case for Primarina
Mm-hmm.
if it's on a team that already has answers to the many threats against Primarina.
Because it's a
So
pretty solid it's a pretty solid water defensive type. Especially, and we don't know if the legendaries or even like the Tapus are coming back, because like it does have serious competition with Tapu Fini, but there is a reason to use Primarina over Tapu Fini and vice versa. But it's the fact that I think Primarina is stronger, and it really depends on if either of them gets skulled. Because if either of them does not, because if like if one gets skulled than the other, that could be pretty good. That could make the difference of who gets used more. I mean, I
of
could
course, yeah,
you
definitely.
could do liquid voice hyper. Like if Primarina does not get skulled, it does not care. I mean, like it won't care as much because it can still liquid voice hyper voice. But yeah, Primarina I think does have its weaknesses, but I think it could be like an anti-metamon. Like it could be good against Arcanine, it could be good against Fluttermane, like you said, it completely shuts down Urshifu, so it will have its spot in the metagame. But what do you think about Araquanid? Because I didn't play Gen 7 VGC, so I have no idea. Araquanid is probably the Pokemon that I don't know much about in this, at least for the Pokemon coming back. Because like for all the Pokemon, I know what it can do. Venusaur is just a fast chlorophyll sleep powder mon. Smeargle is just really good. Oh, Porygon 2 is just a versatile mon. But with Araquanid, I just don't know what it does, so I think I'm gonna have
Here's
to
a
pass that on to you.
Of course, yeah. I started in the playing VGC right before the Sun and Moon era there. So I've definitely seen the power of Araquanid here. And one thing that I think is very interesting that we're gonna need to really see how it plays out is Water Bubble. Now we've seen Flash Fire mods become incredible with Terra. Well, the concept of I'm going to Terra into something that's weak to fire and I'm going to benefit from it. And Araquanid does have Water Bubble, which, of course, for those who might not know, decreases the power of fire type moves by 50% and increases the power of water type moves by 100% before adding stab. So you may look at this thing's base 70 physical attack and say that's not that much, but once you factor in that water bubble, it's essentially coming off a 140 attack. So
Oh
this thing can
yeah.
hit hard, and this thing, if you change it to a typing that like maybe a defensive grass typing or something like that, suddenly you're normally affected by those fire type moves. So I think the water bubble does have a huge possible use case there.
I totally see Terra Grass being great on it. Getting because of the cutting down the fire weakness and getting rid of the electric weakness. And also looking at its stats, it has 132 special defense. Like so that can take on Fluttermane on its own. And it's especially since it's typing. I mean, it's not that good physically bulk. It's not that physically bulky, but because it has just the right typing, it could take on an Urshifu close combat and surging strikes. And you could run water absorb on it if you really want to, but I think water bubble is the clear ability on
Of course,
it.
yeah. You really want those hard hitting liquidations there to make the most use of it. And that's again, that was the biggest problem that I think that many people saw. Well, Araquanid was common in the Sun and Moon era, was that even though it hits like a train when it has that Terra Water active, so or sorry, when it has that water type move selected there, if you try to run coverage on it, you feel that 70 base attack. Like you, it's a bit of a one trick pony there. So,
Could you
um,
imagine
so
just
there,
could you imagine if a Raquinid got wave crash coming off of a water bubble?
yeah. See that is something that we need to consider as well. Like with the right move options, this thing could become a lot more dangerous.
And yeah,
Like
eh, like it could terrestrialize, and I think it's a good, and it's one of those mons where if it doesn't terrestrialize, it can be a hindering, but not to the extent like other mons that we talked about, like Rhyperior. With terrestrialization, I think it's going to be a great mod, like Terra Water, Water Bubble, Liquidization, or Wave Crash, and especially in the rain, that's going to do a huge amount of damage. Or a terrestrialized grass, like a terrestrialized water, get rid of the bug typing, terrestrialized grass, and now you are good against the fire and electric moves again. So I think this move is going to be not move. I think this mon is going to be a great Pokemon for VGC. Um, it won't have like a high percent usage stat, but it will definitely have its place in the metagame. But what's Alcremie? Is that the Pokemon? Wait,
of
I forgot
course, yeah.
about one. I forgot about one. Comfey.
That's actually literally I just had Comfy loaded up as one that I was going to bring up if you didn't hear. Um Triage is interesting.
Yes.
That's there is something to be said. Triage had a very strong impact in late Sword and Shield, I believe, where that +3 priority was sort of devastating to a couple different mons there. And I think that with the right supporting the right partners, it could make a splash again. I think again there's a few options that it gets that are healing moves that are also attacks that are worth considering, as suddenly, oh, these things hit Urshifu, and I think that anything that hits Urshifu is worth considering.
Yeah,
So
worth
I think that
considering.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about the triage priority boost. Um, and like when you look at its stats here, 100 base speed, that's a good speed tier to hit. It's got
Mm-hmm.
great special defense. It's lacking completely on the physical side there, but if you can that 82 base special attack coming off of a +3 boosted priority is gonna do it's gonna do real damage. And it might not pick up all the KOs that you need to there, but it's certainly going to put a lot of pressure onto the field there.
Yeah, with when it comes to Confe, there's only one real weakness that I clearly see with Confe, and that its stats. Like you said, its speed is great, its special defense is great, its
Its
special
ability is fantastic.
yeah, and its move pool is versatile. If we looked at the Generation 8 move set, like it got Dazzling Gleam, it got
Pollen
Encore, it
Puff.
got Calm Mind, it got Pollen Puff, it got Tailwind, Taunt, Toxic, Trick Room, After You, um, Floral
And
Healing,
that's something
Helping
too.
Hand.
The 100 speed is as on a trick room user is so interesting when it can suddenly boost itself to +3 priority. So it doesn't matter if it sets up trick room because it could throw drain kiss on as its fairy type attack coverage, throw giga drain on, and if it's
Mm-hmm.
got that healing element, triage takes effect. So it's if I'm not mistaken there. So it's got an interesting use case. I'm not sure how it's going to do against this meta type of good steel types that we have now here. I do think that things like Goldango aren't going anywhere, and I'm not
And King
sure
Gambit.
what this thing does with Goldango or King Gambit on the field. But it does have a very, very strong ability and decent enough stats that it's worth putting in the builder to see what you can do.
Yeah, and just in case for the people who do not know, its ability, it has a signature ability called Triage, which means this Pokemon healing moves have their priority increased by +3. So that means your heal pulses or pulling puff is a priority move. That's something to think about. But yeah, its only really real weakness that I can see when it comes to it is its stats, where its HP is only 51 and its special attack is only 82. But other than that, it's a good support. It's a good supporting mon. It's not going to sweep your team, obviously, but it's a good supporting mon. It doesn't really need to have a high special attack stat to be a good supporting mon. Um, and I think the last Pokemon that at least on this list that isn't a legendary that is worth considering is Alcremie. And the only reason Alcremie is worth mentioning is because its signature move Decorate. I'm sorry to say Alcremie fans, but Decorate is really the only good move that it has, only good niche that it has. It would not be where it is if it did not have Decorate.
I'm going to jump in here and stand for Al Creamy for a bit here because Al Creamy, I made it into the first Players Cup there, thanks to my little ice cream there. So big fan of Al Creamy. I think that it was definitely there's two categories for me for Pokemon from Sword and Shield. There's Pokemon that were powerful because of Gigantamax and because of Dynamax, like your Regielekis that saw massive drop offs in the Scarlet and Violet era. And then there's Pokemon that were held back by Dynamax. And I think the Alcremie, though people will say it could go and decorate your Dynamax Mon, that's cool, it died to any Dynamax hit. Like you ran Focus Sash on it, and that was your option. But if you look at this thing's stats, 75 defense is not bad, and 121 special defense is fantastic. So if you pair that with Decorate, it's 110 base special attack. That's enough to do some serious damage. That's enough to get those KOs on Urshifu. And on top of that, Fairy typing historically has always been strong. It's got two great abilities in Sweet Veil, which protects itself and its ally from falling asleep. On top of that, with Aroma Veil, which protects itself and its allies from attacks that limit their move choices. So you can use it to block taunts. You can use it to block Amoonguss spores. It's in a very interesting speed tier, I'll say, with the base 64, where it can hit 127. So that is starting to get into territory where in a tailwind it will start to outspeed things. With a scarf there, it hits 190, so that is outspeeding most Flutter main sets and every Urshifu set that besides scarf. So I think that there's options there. I think that there is and I think that again, if you put the right investment into bulk, we've seen in this Scarlet and Violet era that having a dump stat in your defenses is not the end of a Pokemon, especially for something supportive. Like Iron Hands, we know has one of the worst special defense stats out there. So if you drop some EVs into HP and defense, this thing can live some hits and it can get those key decorates off. Which again, how many times have we seen in Pokemon people go and run a convoluted setup to get a weakness policy off? This thing does it for free. This thing does it to any Pokemon that it wants. Like, and there's something huge about that. And again, if you've got a team that's weak to Amoonguss and you like offensive setup, this thing shuts down Spore. So there's a lot to be said about the power of Alcremie. I think that it will take the right team builder and the right team to get it done. But when you can just decorate your Urshifu, you can decorate your Fluttermane, you can decorate any Pokemon that you can think of, except for probably not Goldengo. Then you've got a really strong Pokemon here, and that enables a lot of teams. If we take a look at its other options too, of course it gets Dazzling Gleam, which is fantastic. Um, it does have Helping Hand, so once you get that decorate off, you can start boosting attacks even further. Fake Tears, Substitute, like this thing is not something to particularly scoff at. But I will say, Decorate is one of the best moves in the game. And it was completely held back in late Sword and Shield because Decorate was really it didn't outspeed the powerful things in the meta, and everyone appreciated the power of Decorate to the point where they would just Dynamax and kill the double into the Alcremie. So I think that there's a lot to consider. I will definitely be
Well, I
building
guess I'm going to
something
have
around
to
Alcremie.
eat my own words looking at this Pokemon. Yeah, it does have more than Decorate. I was 100% wrong about that. Its
Oh yeah,
physical
I will
defense
I
is
will stand
terrible,
for this
but
thing forever.
its special defense is pretty good, especially coming off of a 121 special defense. Then, like you said, like the Helping Hand, the Decorate, its abilities are good, and and yeah, it's one of those Pokemon that was severely held back by Dynamax, and coming back, I think I could see this winning a regional. Um, yeah, I totally see it winning a regional. I
Of
think you're
course, yeah.
totally
There was
right.
Okay, well, I think that though there was only really one team in Sword and Shield that really showed off how powerful Alcremie was, and it was pre adding in all the legendaries there with the Fevzi Alcremie Lapras team that really made use of Aurora Veil to make Alcremie last a bit longer there and allow it to boost up some Trick Room mons in the back. But that being said, their Steel Spike was maybe the best move. And you could argue that Steel Spike, Quake, and Airstream were the best moves in Sword and Shield, and one of those just killed Alcremie every time. So I think that there's an element now where perhaps a Focus Sash Alcremie gets a key decorate off onto your Iron Hands, and suddenly Drain Punch is just one hit KOing Pokemon. So I think that there's a very strong use case for this thing. I'm not exactly sure what it is because we'll really have to wait and see what Regulation F looks like. But one thing's for certain is I'll be looking to pick the best suite to have the prettiest Alcremie I can.
Yeah, I think I might dabble without creamy testing when it comes out. Because I think the thing about me is I love testing Pokemon and I love just trying different variety of Pokemon and just seeing how it works. Alcremie is definitely going to be one to test. But that's all the returning Pokemon, at least that aren't legendary or mythical or any sort of that.
Or useless.
Yeah, those are all the Pokemon that are going to make a splash in VGC that are returning that isn't mythical or legendary. But before we end off this episode, I have some things I wanted to talk with you about. So first, we got access to 5 new moves that have officially been revealed that is not leaked. I'm not going to I like to surprise the only leaks I like to look at are just returning Pokemon. I don't like to look at leaks for anything else, but the official Pokemon company has revealed 5 new moves. Um three two two signature moves, 2 moves that seem like it's going to be handed out, and one I'm not certain about. So I think we're going to go over the non-signature moves first. There's a new move called Upper Hand. It's a fighting type move, and also keep in mind we don't know the base power or accuracy for any of these moves. So Upper Hand, it's a fighting type physical move. The user reacts to the target's movements and strikes with the heel of its palm. If the target was trying to use a priority move, Upper Hand will get the jump on them, allowing the user to attack first and causing their opponent to flinch without fail. This move will fail if the target wasn't readying a priority move. I think that move will could get some usage, especially with sucker punches, extreme speeds, and most importantly, fake outs and grassy glides.
I do. That is true. I think that I think it was Hariyama that they showed in the trailer using that
Mm-hmm.
here. So that's a that is interesting about which types they'll dish it out to there. It is a fighting type move, so it does really seem like this. If your team has very little answers to the extreme speed Terra normal stuff that we've seen so often on Dragonite and on Arcanine, there. Um, Having a fighting type move that flinches priority there could definitely be interesting. It
Yeah,
seems very situational to me, though, so I'm not sure if it's going to be something that might be a little too niche to get broader usage. I think it will really be about, is this the call for the specific tournament you're bringing it to? Um, do you think that priority attacks, that your opponent is going to be so limited to them that this is going to be the right move to click? And I think
totally.
that that'll really, it's so situational.
It has its
Do
mind
I think
games.
that Yeah, do I think that will be on some Pokemon? For sure. Do I think that it will be good enough to nudge out those 4 moves that we all love to use on our Iron Hands, that Fake Out, Wild Charge, Drain Punch, Heavy Slam? I don't think so. So it will depend on its distribution and what the meta game is. I think it's way too situational for me to gauge its power, though.
Totally. I think it's going to be situational. I think it could be justified on a move. Just keep in mind for everyone listening, we don't know what these moves are going to be given to. I mean,
Of course.
We know Hariyama gets upper hand because it was shown, but we don't know if like Iron Hands will get the move. We don't know if any other fighting types will get this move. Um, I think it could be good on some Pokemon, but like what you said, if Iron Hands did somehow get the move, it's do you slot it out for another move? Like do you slot it out with Heavy Slam? Some may say yes, some may say no. It's very debatable.
And I think it will really come down to if we see Upper Hand pick up a big performance at a tournament, like make it to day two, make it into the top cut. I think that what will really be the difference there is the team builder making a meta call and it acknowledging the priority moves are going to be strong enough that maybe they don't even need to click this move. Maybe it's just one of those things that you have as a threat to your opponent that causes them to maybe keep that Dragonite in the back. And I
Yeah,
think that
totally.
that's that's going to be the huge question: is will priority spam continue to be as a big enough problem that this is the move you want to run? Because again, there's nothing more upsetting than hitting that sucker punch and having your opponent swords dance instead, and just knowing that you could have just done some serious damage there and made that calc wrong. And I think that the Upper Hand will have that same problem of it's great if your opponent is choice band locked into extreme speed, but if they're that assault vest variant instead, suddenly the mind games gets really, really big.
Yeah, totally. The next move I am so excited for, it's called Psychic Noise. This psychic type special move deals damage as it bathes the target in an abrasive sound waves. This attack also prevents the target from recovering HP through moves, abilities, or items for a certain number of turns. I am going to assume that's either 2 or 3. Why am I excited for it? Because it stops Drain Punch. I mean, that's what I suspect. It says that it stops healing from moves. So I don't so it's when it was showing what it did, it stopped Dondozo from using rest. So that clearly confirms that it will stop using Pokemon from rest, recover, roost, slack off, all those recovery moves. But I'm wondering if it will stop moves like a Drain Punch and Giga Drain and all those healing type moves. Because if it does, we have an answer to Iron Hands and its Drain Punches, which I am so excited about.
The other interesting thing here is the fact that it's a noise-based move. Sound-based moves are very interesting, especially the ability to get around things like substitute.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge benefit to having something in your back pocket that can punish those Pokemon for setting up a substitute there. Of course, they showed it in the trailer using it against Dundozo, who loves to sit behind a substitute there and loves that sort of resto chesto set. So there's a lot to say about a move that not only prevents healing but can prevent healing while the Pokemon is behind a sub. Which of course a lot of those bulky Pokemon that like to heal themselves back up love to do so behind a substitute.
I know,
So
this is a good move. This was a move that was introduced that I am loving. Like it's not
yeah.
going to be broken. It's not going to be on too many. I don't think it's going to be on like too many Pokemon. The real question is how many is like again what Pokemon is going to use it and if it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be a signature move. I think it's going to be on the
No.
pretty much almost every psychic type. One psychic type I am begging, please give it to Farigiraf. Farigiraf would love this move. Like, please give it to Farigiraf, and now Farigiraf completely can completely counter, not completely, but counter Iron Hands, stopping the fake out and being able to stop the drain punches, being able so then it forces to use heavy slam or wild charge. Farigiraf would love this move. It would be great on Farigiraf, and I would love using it on Farigiraf. And
There's
I
also
think,
something to be said about the other Pokemon that we've brought up today here of
mm-hmm,
what does Comfy and what does that
Comfy,
Recover Porygon
totally.
2 do against this Psychic Noise. If this move has enough base power to justify running it, those Pokemon will have serious struggles. So there's a serious question about suddenly recover is not a great move to pick, and it does say it prevents the target from recovering HP. So does that mean that a rest Pokemon would still fall asleep? They just wouldn't recover. Does that
No,
mean
no.
that Drain Punch does damage, or does it
It said
stop the move entirely?
it here's when it was showing the gameplay. It said it showed three pictures. It said Gardevoir used Psychic Noise, and it showed Dondozo getting hit. And it said the opposing Dondozo was prevented from healing. So I don't. So I think it's like a fail move. Like if you use it, then it just fails, like a Sucker Punch against a non-attacking Pokemon. So I don't think they'll fall asleep. But it just all depends on what moves does it officially stop. If it only stops status moves, or if it stops attacking moves. I am praying that it also stops attacking moves like Giga Drain or Bitter Blade, or most importantly, Drain Punch, because
Reading the wording is very similar to how triage is worded, and that helps with damage. That affects damaging moves as well. So if I went on my gut intuition, I would say that it affects damaging moves.
same here. But here's the
Yeah.
question, but here's one that I'm also wondering about. Does it stop Pull and Puff? Because Pull and Puff is a move that either attacks the opponent, or it heals the ally. So I'm wondering.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if it made a pollen puff attack your own ally?
That would be. Yeah, because
It just stays as an attack.
Amoonguss socks would kind of drop if that happened, but that's a weird
Well, I
question
mean,
because
again, it's a
Pollen
psychic
Puff,
type attack, right?
yeah, and Pollen
You
Puff
don't want to
is
be
a
sitting in
weird.
Amoonguss.
And Pollen Puff, and not Pollen Puff is, even though it's not just on Amoonguss, it's like that gray category of, does it stop Pollen Puff? So that's what I'm excited to see. There's one thing I'm confident on. I think Psychic Noise has a base damage of 80. Here's why. I don't think it will be like Chilling Water and will only have 50 base power. I think it either has 80 or 90. When it was showing gameplay, Dondozo was in the yellow when Gardevoir used it. Dondozo doesn't have a good special defense stat. It's really bulky, but it has a not great special defense stat, and it did like around 80% to Dondozo. If it was 50 base power, Gardevoir could not do that much damage to Dondozo. I mean, look how much big of a Pokemon nerd I am that I can see what base damage it is just by looking at the calculations. But um,
I think you're on
I
the money about that
I
one here.
think it
I do
does
think
because it
it
does
isn't
80%. I think it because it does 80% to Dondozo. I think it won't be 50 base power because the 50 base power does not do that much to Dondozo. I think it's either around 80 or 90. And even if it's around 80, it's a justified move to being used over Psychic or Psyshock. So
Yeah,
I think it's on
I
80.
think that makes sense here. I think it does seem to have a usable base power here. The distribution will probably be the key thing there. Is which
Just
Pokemon end up getting this?
please give it to for Rigorath. Please.
Yeah, give it to
That's
Fluttermane.
That's the number one thing I want out of this whole DLC. I want so many buffs for so many Pokemon. Like there's so many buffs I want to. There are some Pokemon that I want to give. Like I would love Weavile to get Triple Axle back. I would love Brubonnet to get knockoff. But out of everything that I want, please give this move for Rigorath. I would love Game Freak forever if they gave this move to Rigorath. So now we
I think
move
Armarouge would be another
Armarouge.
good
Yeah,
option as
totally.
well. Yeah, I think that Armarouge suddenly, your ability to maybe heal yourself up and stall out that Trick Room might be inhibited if Armarouge gets a good option there. So, I think that there's maybe Indeedee even
What if
Indeedee,
Cresselia
of
got
course.
it?
Oh no, don't say
If
that.
imagine, could you imagine if Cresselia got it?
Yeah, I think that that is a scary option. And again, I think that's for instance, like there's a lot of Pokemon say that Indeedee doesn't really have a good preferred attack that it runs, right? Like
Yeah,
what do you run? Psychic, Dazzling Gleam? Like neither of them are really impacting the battle as much as you'd want to for an attack. And I think that this might be the answer of what do you put as that fourth move? You've got your Follow Me, you've got your Trick Room, you've got your Protect. maybe this is the answer for that fourth and DD move.
100%. Like, it would be amazing on Indeedee. It would be amazing on Ferograph. It would be amazing on Cresselia. It would be amazing on Armourouge. It just all depends. I don't think this is a signature move. There's no way it's a signature move for Gardevoir. I think it will get usage. And I think it really depends on who gets it. I just pray that it's Ferograph. But now if we move on to the signature moves, supposedly, um, we go move on to first Raging Bolt's new move, Thunderclap. This electric type special move allows the user to move first if the opposing Pokemon has chosen an attack as its next move. But this move will fail if the target was not readying an attack on its own. Okay, so it's basically Sucker Punch, but an electric type version, and it's special.
And special. Yeah.
So
So
I have to guess
special
that this
electric
is
sucker punch.
So there's two things that tells me. So there's two things that this tells me about Ferrigger, Raging Bolt. Sorry, it's one. It seems like Raging Bolt is a special attacker. Since it gave it a special type move, unless it's either mixed or the like. That's what I'm guessing. If I was a betting man, I would guess that it has a higher special attack stat, and I'm guessing that it's really slow since they felt that they needed to give it to since they felt that they needed to give it a priority move like that, because like really if you have a fast Pokemon you don't really want to give it a fast move unless it's like Ice Shard or Aqua Jet. Since this is as the same priority as a Sucker Punch, it should have the same base stat as Sucker Punch, so it should be base 70. And since it's a priority move electric type, I think that that Raging Bolt is like a really strong special attacker, but really slow um to balance it out.
And there's something to be said about, again, we've brought up again and again, even though this is primarily a discussion about the returning Pokemon, we've brought up again and again that Urshifu Rapid Strike. That's really one of the Pokemon to beat in this upcoming format. And having something that I presume it's a electric dragon, right?
It
So
is Electric
the
Dragon, it was
having
confirmed.
having something that's got a 4 times resist to that rapid strike and
Wait.
can.
Electric does not resist water.
Oh, electric doesn't resist water here, right? Okay. Yeah, but having something that does resist it here, dragon types have been very, very common for people to bring in this late regulation E because of those Urshifus. So having a dragon type that can essentially pressure it to not use its best move, I think that that's going to be huge. And I think that water type and flying type have both been very strong in this past in this past generation here. I think there's been a lot of Terra Flying Terra Blast Pokemon. And all of them do not want
Mm-hmm.
to be taking this. The fact that you could run it if it is a slow Pokemon, running it next to something like that Amoonguss, suddenly Terra Blast from your Landorus is not going to be an answer because you're not going to be able to safely Terra flying in front of this thing, no matter how fast you
Totally.
are. Um,
Yeah,
so I think
I'm
there's a lot of potential for it.
so
Especially, I assume it'll just be a Sucker Punch clone. Based on I assume it'll just have a similar base power to Sucker Punch. I don't see why it wouldn't. So I think that if they distribute this well, it's going to be really cool. It'll just I guess has it been confirmed to be an exclusive
here's the
um move
it's not
for this new
confirmed.
mon?
It's not
Okay.
confirmed, but here's the thing. When Walking Wakenar and Leaves came out, they both gave it signature moves where like they got stronger in the sun or they got stronger in the psychic terrain, and they were signature moves for their respective Pokemon. So I'm guessing that because it's kind of like with Aqua Jet and Bullet Punch and Quick Attack, they all do the same thing, but different typings. And it's just, and I think like Double Edge or not Double Edge, Flare Blitz, Wave Crash, Wood Hammer, they do the same thing, but it's different typing. So I think this new move is like Sucker Punch, the exact same thing as Sucker Punch, but an electric type move. And I think that because it's a priority move, it's a it's a low speed Pokemon, bulky, strong but low speed. So like a Trick Room attacker. And I think it's a signature move because they showed it for Raging Bolt using it, but
Yeah,
to
I
my
think that's a
knowledge,
fair
it has
guess.
not been confirmed.
Of course, yeah. So I think that that's something definitely fair to consider. And again, there has been in this Scarlet and Violet era a very consistent use case for water type and flying type Pokemon. I think that both of them have been very strong typings, and I think that a lot of the good flying type Pokemon have needed that Terra flying to
Mm-hmm.
do the damage that they need to. So having this priority electric type attack could be very dominant in the format. I think that we won't really know until we find out what this thing's stats are, but it does seem like it's. I'm hopeful for this move. I'll say.
Yeah, that's the thing we could say about every single Pokemon and every single move and every single thing that we've talked about today can only be summed up to one thing. It's only theorized. We don't truly know. I mean, for Smeargle and Incineroar, obviously they're going to make big impacts, but for everything else, it's just we're theorizing. We have no idea because the like some things have only been confirmed, some things we're just speculating and theorizing. Because like with Iron
Of course.
Crown, it has a new move called Tachyon Cutter. This steel type special move, I think that confirms Iron Crown is a special attacker, but I think we'll need to talk about that later. The steel type special move never misses, allowing a user to unleash 2 successive hits on a target. So it's a steel type move and it hits twice. But here's the thing. The two moves that we talked about, Tachyon Cutter and Raging Bolt's new move, they were both special type moves. So that really begs the question of if they're both special attackers.
Yeah. And I think that that might be the case here. If there does seem to be a trend of the paradox versions of the Swords of Justice being special attackers, I wouldn't consider that to be out of the realm of possibility.
Do you mean
Um,
like do you mean like the Gen 2 legendaries? Because Iron Leaves is a physical attacker.
Yeah, that is true. So that is interesting. Just for the unrevealed ones, I was meaning there, but
Yeah.
yeah, for these ones here, the idea that the two of them could be special, it doesn't seem unrealistic. Um, so I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility.
And also
The
when we were talking,
idea,
sorry, you go.
yeah, can you? Okay, yeah, the idea of bypassing accuracy checks is very good for somebody like me that I hate missing my moves, so could definitely be a cool option there. Um, and I think that it'll really depend on the damage output of this thing. As a special steel type attack, if I'm clicking a steel type attack, I want it to be doing damage to Flutter Mane and getting through that 135 base special defense there is a lot. So the question will
Totally.
be how much damage does this thing do, and does it do enough to flutter?
Because with two attacking hit moves other than surging strike, yeah, no, even with surging strikes, like two attack hitting moves, they usually been on the weak power. Like with Farigiraf's signature move, it's only 40 base power, but because it hits twice, it equals to 80. um we don't know, we could know because even if it's 50 base power, 100% base power move that never misses, that hits twice, like 50 then 50, that's really good. If it's 40, it's
Yeah.
good. If it's 50, it's great. If it's base
If it's
60, it's
20,
broken.
yeah.
If
And if
it's
it's 20, it's
20, it's
useless. Like yeah,
if it's
exactly.
30
That's
or
the
if
big
it's
question.
30 or under, if it's 30 base power or under, it's if it's 40, it's good, but anything other than 40 is just really good or broken.
And that's the thing too, is that it needs to get that K on a Flutter Mane, because the fact of the matter is this thing is a steel psychic type, right? Like you do not want to
Mhm.
be taking those shadow balls. Like the if you cannot deal with the Flutter Mane will deal with you, and
Yeah.
that's been the ongoing trend ever since they introduced Paradox Mons into the format. Is if you don't deal with the Flutter Mane is going to deal with you.
So I
It does
think
not mind hitting normally effective moves into you because it hits so hard.
So I think these two moves that we just talked about are signature moves because they only showed the Paradox Pokemon using it. And I think they showed it and I think they knew what they were doing when they were showing it with Paradox Mons because they're like, hey,
Yeah.
it's a new move and we're showing it with a new Pokemon. So I'm guessing that's a signature move. And because I don't think they would want to give it to like another, like I don't think they would want to give it to like a Goldango, even though Goldango would want to use Make It Rain. I think it's those two's were signature moves. But they showed off a new move called Electro Shock, and I am twisted. I have no idea if this is going to be a distributed move or if it's going to be a signature move. It's an electric type special move, and it goes to the new Pokemon Archulodon. But here's the thing, Archulodon is not an electric type, so it does not get stab off of this. But Archulodon gathers vast quantities of energy and fires off a high voltage bolt of electricity. Under rainy weather conditions, Archulodon can immediately fire off this attack without having to spend time charging it up. So I thought it was an electric type move of Solar Beam, where it needs to charge up and then do an attack. But if it's in the right weather, then it does not need to charge up. So I thought it was going
It's
to be
more like
Solar Beam.
Meteor Beam.
But then, yeah, then I saw the pictures it showed. It showed four pictures. It said Archulodon used electroshock. And then the next one, Archulodon absorbed electricity. But the thing that is most important is Archulodon's special attack rose. So it has to be a meteor beam, but that doesn't have to take a recharge turn with Power Herb. And that is
Yeah, so that's interesting.
crazy
So that's if it is a Meteor Beam clone, then that means we're looking at something like a 120 base power. Like
with
that
90%
maybe they'll
accurate.
drop maybe they'll drop it because of the rain influence there, but there is something scary about, again, rain has been so dominant in the Scarlet and Violet era that
Yeah.
they're having this strong electric type attack coming off of a Pokemon that doesn't have the weaknesses of an electric type Pokemon, could be
Hmm.
really powerful.
Yeah,
Um,
because just in case for those of you don't know, Archulodon is the new Pokemon evolved from Duraludon in Generation 8. It's a Steel Dragon type, so it's still Steel Dragon from its old thing. It doesn't get stab off of Drift, but it does not care because Pokemon who used Meteor Beam usually didn't get stab off of it. But the fact that makes it so scary is that it doesn't need Power Herb to recharge. You can if you want to, but you don't need Power Herb. All you need is Rain, and it doesn't take the recharge turn, and it boosts its special attack. So that means if you pair it with like a Politoed or forgetting the name, the other
Pelipper?
Drizzlemon, Pelipper, yeah, you pair it with Pelipper, and now for like 5 turns, if the weather does not change, for 5 turns, it does not need to charge. So you can just keep boosting and boosting and boosting and boosting and boosting. You just keep going. You just keep going until rain is done. That's
Yeah, even if it
terrifying.
was 80 base power in the rain, that's terrifying. Like,
Yeah,
even if it's not Meteor Beam base power, doing damage and boosting is scary at every time. It gives me like PTSD about the times of Power Up Punch. Like,
I
Power Up
guess
Punch isn't
totally.
a super powerful move, but when used in succession, it swept teams. And this is the type of thing that makes you go, this will make a splash in rain teams. I do believe that.
Totally.
Um,
And
s-
also when you it's an evolved form of Duraludon, and Duraludon had a special attack stat of 120. So that means this evolved form has a special attack of more than 120. Even if it's 130, it's terrifying.
and
Cuz like
again, there's the other factor of it. They have not given us this thing's hidden ability. Does it
it
still have stalwart? Like,
it
and
has
that
the
is
ability.
that is
So it has two abilities that has been confirmed, but it has not been confirmed on if it has hidden on what hidden ability it has. It has the ability stamina and sturdy. A steel dragon type with stamina. Oh,
Yeah, and again, there's a recurring theme in Pokemon that usually There are some exceptions, but usually hidden abilities are maintained. And Duraludon did have Stalwart as its hidden ability. So there is something to be said that perhaps this thing is going to have an ability that ignores redirection, which is huge.
Yeah.
Follow Me has been everywhere. Um, since the introduction of Ogerpon, it's a premier Follow Me mon. Rage Powder on Amoonguss has been everywhere. Amoonguss was arguably the best Pokemon in Regulation D and has been creeping back into E. I imagine it'll still be used quite often in F. So I think that if it gets Stalwart, that could be very, very scary.
Because you keep in mind, because like everyone needs to keep in mind that if it's in rain, it does not need to charge. Even if it's 70 base power, just 70 base power, and it's still terrifying because you just keep boosting and you just keep boosting and you just keep boosting. And to the point where even if it's 70 base power, if you boosted twice, then that 70 base power does not matter because now you can just start using your stab. Now, the one thing is that we don't know if this is a signature move. They showed Archulodon using it, but they didn't. But they did not confirm if it's signature or if it's going to be passed around. I'm praying it's a
I
signature move. Do not pass this move around. Please do not give this to any Pokemon. I don't care I don't care that Archulodon will get it because if it's a signature move, cool, great. I will use it. Please, begging Game Freak, do not give this to any more Pokemon.
I think that you're on the right track there. I do think that them revealing it on a new Pokemon, the implication is that it typically would be that it's a exclusive move for that Pokemon. And I do think, again, don't give this thing to Regieleki. Don't give
Oh
this thing to
man.
other electric types. Like
Even if,
we
and if the fact is that Archulodon is not electric type is not electric type Pokemon, it does not get stabbed off of it. You just give this to any good special attacker, and it's going to run rampant. Like
and I'll
even if
correct
the
you there.
special attacker.
It's not an electric type yet. It can Terra.
Oh right,
So,
because like what if because like Gojim because like what if you gave this move to like Goldango, or what if you gave this move to Magnezone, or even just a Pokemon with an all right special attacking stat? Like imagine like what if you gave this to Jolteon, a Pokemon that only has 110 special attack stat, or just any special attacking Pokemon? Like could you imagine if like Tornadus got this move? Just any decent or Sandy Shock. Sandy Shock would be great with that move.
yeah. So hopefully they don't change it up too much by giving it a wide distribution. I don't think they will. I think this to
Same here.
me has all of the characteristics of a exclusive move there. The types of it seems like it's extremely powerful, but that's expected for a move that's limited to a single Pokemon. So I think that it's probably just going to be Archaludon or whatever and Smeargle using this thing. So
Yeah. I don't think Smeargle will care if its special attack gets boosted. I mean it has a
no,
20 base.
it's gonna have to use it quite a few times.
It has a special attack stat of 20. Even if you boost it by 4, it's still not going to be doing that
Yeah,
much.
if your opponent leaves your Smeargle on the field for 6 turns, then they've probably got bigger problems than you boosting its special attack.
But yeah, there's one last thing that we should talk about. The 19th Terra type that has been discovered. When they were showing it, they showed a Excalibur, and it had the moves Dragon Dance, Icicle Crash, Glaive Rush, and Terra Blast. And when they terrestrialized into this 19th type, only Terra Blast was effective, but we don't know anything about this. That is the only thing that has been confirmed, that it's a new Terra type and it can work with Terra Blast, but we don't know anything about this. We don't know if it's all types in one. We don't know if it's going to be like a curse and it's just not a typing. Like and it's just what's it called? Like what is it called when like a Pokemon loses its typing? Like
Oh, like when you use burn up or whatever,
Yeah.
when it becomes like no typing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah,
is it
that's
in
The
Jake,
the
you had
pro
a
the
theory.
interesting thing though, there it does show if you look at the move selection in the trailer there, they all have that sort of glow around the typings on it there that would be typically indicating when a Pokemon's Terra that that move gets a boost. Like if when the Baxcalibur uses it there, you can see that the Glaive Rush and the Icicle Crash and the Terra Blast all have the same glow around them. So does that imply that it gets stab on everything? I don't know.
Would be
Um,
scary.
yeah, I it's interesting.
Because and when they were
I have
showing off
no
the
clue.
promotion, when they were showing off the promotion for this new Terror type, they showed this video where all the types were circling around this thing and then all combined into one. And that is very important. They wouldn't market that if it wasn't true. So it has to be something that has to do with every single typing in the game. There was a theory, I think it
Uh,
was you or someone else, where they said it was like Arceus, like it was like Legends Arceus. When you fight Arceus at the end of the game, he turns into the type that is super effective against you and then uses a super effective move. So maybe that Terra type is going to be like that thing in Arceus, but that's too good to be true.
Yeah, I think more than likely, if I had to make a shot in the dark at what this is, I would say that it gives you stab on your moves, but it takes away your resistances. So that would be the trade-off there, that you don't
What do you
resist
mean
anything
stab on
anymore,
it?
like same type attack bonus.
Yeah, like,
Sorry
do you
to, to,
think it
to,
would
to,
turn
to
it?
those who might not know, when a Pokemon uses an attack that's the same type as the Pokemon that's using it, it gets a 1.5 times boost to its damage output. So and when you Terra, typically it would add stab to the move of the type that you're Terraing into, and it would stack with your previous stab. So if you Terra Fire on your Iron Hands and use a Terra Blast, then you'd still get the 1.5 times boost on your Terra Blast because you're a fire type. But if you were to Wild Charge with a Terra Electric, you'd be getting that analytic sort of 2 times boost to your attack. So I'm thinking that it looks like all of the attacks it's giving a boost to there. That's kind of what the icons get, the vibe that it gives to me here. I may be calling it wrong, but and I think that if it does give stab on everything, and if it does give Terra Blast into its own type with stab on it, then I imagine that there'd have to be a trade-off. And if you're changing your type into every type, perhaps that trade-off is you don't have any resistances anymore.
You don't like, yeah,
Which I
because when I
think
meant by
could be
you
a good
getting,
balance.
because when I meant that you getting stab off of it, I think you will get stab off of it because it showed you terrestrializing and then it showed like Terra Blast. But the thing I want have to wonder is like what you said. What resistances does it get? What weaknesses does it get? If it has an immunity? Because let's say a Pokemon came out and it had every single type in the entire game. Like it was all the types in one. It would be weak to rock. Only two times weak to rock. But I don't think this is going to be a move where every single type is into one. But we have to remember about that one promotional video where it showed all the types combining into one. So it has to be something like that. So we have to wonder what resistances does it have, what immunities does it have, and what weaknesses does it have, and what it can hit for super effective damage. That is the number one thing to be most fearful of is what damage does it do.
And that's the interesting thing. We do see it was fighting a Dragonite at the time in the trailer that they showed. And Icicle Crash and Glaive Rush, of course, are super effective, but Terra Blast shows as normally effective. Once it terastallizes into this 19th type. So the question is is it just a type that can literally hit everything for normally effective, that would be probably the most balanced thing that I can think of here. That this is a type that it doesn't have resistances and it doesn't have super effective. It's just a type. It's like normal type, but without the ghost immunity and without the fighting type weakness. So if I had to make a guess, that's what I'd assume it was. But it could be anything. It's so unorthodox that I think that I, for one, am really excited to see what it is.
If I were to guess, this is not a good guess, I will say. I'm not proud of this guess, but it's a guess nonetheless because I have no idea what this 19th type can mean. Um, I think it's going to be something where you have no resistances, you have no immunities, you have no resistances, everything hits you for neutral damage. But if you use Terra Blast on an opposing Pokemon, it can do super effective damage. Actually, no, that guess is wrong. The promote it said Terra Blast effective, so already I'm wrong. So I was going to say like it does super effective damage to any move it touches, but you get no resistances. But from the video that we saw, it says Terra Blast is only effective, so I'm already wrong on that front. So you might be right.
Yeah, I think it might just be like it is a clean slate, like a neutral type, like neutral in all regards, which could be really cool because what if it needs to be something that doesn't make the broken more broken? Um,
Yeah.
and like if it came with a bunch of resistances, that could really change things. But if it takes away all your resistances and doesn't do super effective damage, then suddenly it just turns everything into a normally effective move. That could be really good on a Pokemon like Fluttermane. Um,
What if it, or it could be
but
a move where where it takes all the resistances. Where what if it like what if it's a Terra? Here's my actual guess. What if it's a Terra that takes away all your weaknesses? Actually, that could make the
that,
broken even more broken.
yeah, I think that that could get really, really out of hand, especially
Okay,
for
I am
Pokemon with
terrible
very
at guessing
limited
what
weaknesses.
I am
Yeah,
terrible at what
imagine that. Yeah, that could get really out of hand really
I'm
quick.
just terrible
Um,
at guessing what this thing is, at what this
well,
thing is, but it's so hard to guess what this thing can do.
it's
We can,
so
and only time
unorthodox,
will
right?
tell. What?
Yeah. It's so unorthodox, like, the
Yeah.
concept of all types combining, like, who knows what that could possibly mean, and especially, like, with the Scarlet and Violet era, like, there's already been so many out of the box decisions coming from the Pokemon Company here that I think that the we are gonna have to wait and see, and then we are gonna have to let the information pour out naturally, and I imagine we're 30 days off, we're gonna be getting some details soon, whether it's from leaks or whether it's from the Pokemon Company themselves. I imagine we're going to be in the realm where we're going to be getting another trailer soon, and it's going to include some real details.
I think you're right. We just have to wait and see. What we're going to do is when it comes out, I will make an episode explaining all the new things that of the DLC have come out. I will make an episode of all the things that DLC has done, like coming out with new stuff and all that stuff, and that's when we'll talk about what it does when we actually know what it actually does. But for only now, we can only speculate. But yeah, I think that's all the Pokemon and all the stuff that we need that we could talk about today if we weren't going over other leaks. But I think that's all the time we have for this episode today. So thank you, Jake, for coming on this episode and helping me discuss these things.
Of course, thanks for having me here. Always a pleasure to theorize with you. I will emphasize here, of course, theory crafting can only go so far. We all remember back in the day when Tapu Fini and Cartana were expected to be the bad ones. So don't take anything I say as something that's the solid truth until we have more
Oh yeah,
info. But
totally.
always fun to have some theoretical discussions there about where the meta might go.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's the thing we should always upfrontly say is that we are not like this isn't official. If we say a Pokemon is bad and it turns out to be good, then we are wrong. And then vice versa. We could totally say like, "Oh, this Pokemon's going to be so good," but it doesn't really do anything good at all. Everything here is theorized and just based off like evidence. Like just based off our experience and based off like evidence, but we can only do the best that we can. But thank you guys for listening to this episode, and I'll see you guys next week.